right, my friends, it is now time for the Soulful Psalms segment of Beacon of Truth. The Soulful Psalms, we take one of the Psalms from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, also called the Ketuvim, or the writings. And Jesus refers to this, of course, in the Gospels as well, the law. He said he came to fulfill everything that was written about him in the law, the prophets, and the writings. And that's the Ketuvim. And we hear these beautiful psalms in every holy sacrifice of the Mass. And what we do in the soulful psalms to take those psalms and to connect them more deeply to your everyday lived experience. And well, today, my friends, we're going to continue our look at a very long psalm, Psalm 106. So Psalm 106 is a psalm that occurs at the end of book 4, right? Psalms 90 to 106 are in book 4, and which means that the end of this psalm is going to have a doxology. But Psalm 106 is an historical narrative psalm. So this traces the history of salvation to the people of Israel. With this psalm, like many of the psalms in book 4, it doesn't have any attribution. So we don't know, there's no superscript or prescript to tell us who wrote this psalm. Although some of the psalms do. Psalm 90 we know was written by Moses. Other psalms we know in this book were written by David. You know, but this particular psalm doesn't tell us who wrote it. But this psalm, we looked at this psalm earlier. It's walking us through salvation history. So it starts off saying, Psalm 106, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. And then begins to tell the story of how God saves his people, Israel, through his incredible acts of mercy, including, of course, it starts off with bringing them out of slavery to Egypt. Then it goes into crossing of the Red Sea, how they defied him at the Red Sea. They doubted the Lord, and how Lord brought them through that. And as they continue to trek through the desert, they begin to doubt God. At Meribah, for example, they're complaining, and so he gives them water. He gives them manna and quail from heaven. Then they get to Horeb, and of course they build the golden calf, and God punishes them for that because they worship another god. While Moses was up getting the Ten Commandments, the people were down there worshiping a molten image of metal, that can't save or bring salvation. And so and God was going to, obviously, he was going to wipe out. He said, remember in the scriptures in Exodus says, well, I'm going to wipe this people out, and I'm going to restart with you, Abraham, and your prosperity will take it from here. But then he intervenes and says, no, Lord, then all the other peoples around us are going to say, look what the Lord, he promised to bring them to the promised land. He didn't keep his promise. It said he destroyed them in the desert. What kind of God is that? A God that doesn't keep his promises, that, wipes out the people that he says that he loves. So Abraham intervenes and the Lord relents of his punishment. Although some of them were punished, Dathan and some of the other tribes, some of the other tribes, clans within the tribes were wiped out. And that's when we have also the Levitical priesthood kicking in as well. So we're picking up in verse 24 here. So just right before this says, for this he said he would destroy them, but Moses and the man he had chosen stood in the breach before him to turn back his anger from destruction. Then 24 says, then they scorned the desirable land. They had no faith in his word. They complained inside of their tents and did not listen to the voice of the Lord. And so we see this continuing pattern of, yes, we're going to listen to the Lord, and no, we're not going to listen to the Lord, or yeah, okay, we're going to listen to the Lord. The Lord, answers our prayers, but then we're going to turn our backs on him again. We see this continual pattern of this kind of roller coaster of faith in God. And man, can we relate to this or what? Same thing happens in our life. Yes, God, everything's going well. I love you. Everything's cool. And then something happens that, that's a trial that happens, or, um, some kind of tragedy or sadness, or, a testing happens in our life. And then we kind of wane in our list to do it. Should I really trust God right now? Or why is God allowing this to happen? And then, God brings us out of it, and then we're happy again. It's just continually roller coaster of emotions in our relationship with the Lord. Um, and so the Israelite people experience this as well. So they brought him out of Egypt, and then they doubted him. Then he crossed the Red Sea. Then he walked to the desert and doubted him again. Then he feeds them, and then they go to the Mount Horeb, and then they have to go to the calf. But now he's bringing them out of it again. But now they're at another point now where they're complaining once more. And so what does the Lord do? So he raised his hand to them and swore that he would lay them low in the desert, would disperse their descendants through the nations and scatter them throughout the lands. Right. And so what's the God's kind of punishment here? To disperse them, right? Not to wipe them out, but to instead of unity, right? They're wanting division. Said, okay, well, if you don't want to do it my way, you're going to do it the pagan way, right? And so what does that mean? That he's going to in his permissive will, allow these other tribes, these other nations to overwhelm the people of Israel, because they don't want to follow the Lord as their God. They want to follow other gods. They want to follow false gods, and so God's going to say, well, if you're going to do that, then, if that's what you want, I love you. So, here's the natural, here's the natural, consequences of your decision. I don't like your decision, but I love you enough to respect your decision to say no to me. And so when that happens, then the Lord's will can't be fulfilled, and so He allows them to go along a path that may not be what they desired, and then they'll realize in that moment, that my ultimate desire, my where my heart really wants me to be is with God. Same thing happens to us. Sometimes God will try us. Sometimes He will test us. Um, just like it says in the scriptures, just like a father chastises his son in order to bring him into a closer relationship with him, that God will do that for us as well. Not because He doesn't like us, but there's something that He needs us to learn, so that ultimately we can be in deeper intimacy and relationship with Him.
Well, and also in understanding why someone believes what they believe, or has actions that don't make sense to us, we get to know them. And then also is if and or when God advises any instruction based on His truth, based on our experience with God, then that's an investment. But even if you're not there to help, you're just there to listen and learn, then the next time an opportunity presents itself where someone who's also made those same decisions, you have an understanding and an empathy for, based on what they've been through, as to why they see things or do things the way they do.
Yeah, which may not be the way that we would necessarily do it, but everybody's different,
Sure.
and God speaks through that personal experience, because God knows you better than you know yourself. He says, Psalm 139, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you
Yes.
deeply, personally, intimately. And so, yeah, so everybody has a different temperament. Everybody has a different way of receiving even the same information.
Sure.
Someone has a different way of receiving. It's like music, right? You hear the same song, but it hits you differently because that
Yeah.
song speaks to you in a way that's different than it speaks to someone else. But it's the same song,
Yep.
right? And so, yeah, your point is well taken. That when the one God who loves all of His children the same, right? It's just like a parent. You don't love one of your children more than the other one. You may love them differently,
Sure.
right? They may experience your love in a different way because it's a different child, but you love all of your children with the same love. God the Father loves us all the same way, but we may be receiving or understanding that love differently.
Yeah. Well, and I also love it too when we're praying for people and maybe we don't understand their circumstances. Is the easiest prayer that I've found is, Lord, reveal yourself to them in this situation. because then if and or when those situations reoccur, they'll know how to navigate them, right? I mean, we're not given a to-do list in the Bible. We're given examples of when you do this, not that, what happened to those people. And, history repeats itself. So same thing in our own lives. If I have a pattern that I need to be aware of, what can I do to be so far away from that pattern that I'm not doomed to repeat it? Then God can reveal that. And that is our best prayer for anyone, whether we're closely affected by what they're doing or not.
Yeah, because life is that roller coaster, right? It's up and down. It's not linear.
Yeah.
And so we know that those times of trials are coming, and that's when we need to lean more into our relationship with Christ, more a deeper, personal, more intimate relationship.
Yep.
Love that.
For more on the Psalms with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, check out Beacon of Truth weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts.